Moving right along, we're now going to look at receivables and define the overview on it and the terms. Again, this may be very helpful for the quiz, and it'll just help you understand what we're doing. First of all, let's classify receivables. You've got accounts receivable, which we've been working with, and they're normally expected to be collected within 30 days, so that's a current receivable. You have a notes receivable, and that's going to be due in a longer period of time, usually 90, 6 months, maybe a year. Notes receivable are usually larger amounts than the accounts receivable. Sometimes an account receivable can't be paid within 30 to 60 days, so they'll turn it into a note receivable with interest on it. Other receivables you could have that you can collect within a year, they're classified as current assets, interest receivable maybe, on a large note receivable, or taxes receivable from the government, a payback. Possibly if you've made loans to your officers or your employees, you could get a receivable back on that. Although this, if you are a large corporation, you normally cannot give a loan to your officers or your employees. And that is courtesy of Sarbanes-Oxley Act. So those are the type of current receivables you can have on the books. If you happen to have a receivable that you can't collect, and we all have those if you're in business, sometimes we will sell our receivables to other companies, and this is called factoring, simply because we need the money faster than we can collect it. And they will take, whoever we sell these to or factor them to, will take a factor out for them and will receive a certain amount of the money. And again, no matter how careful we are with who we loan to, you're probably always going to have somebody who can't pay a bill. And then you have to create an expense because that's the cost of doing business, right? And that is called a bad debt expense. Uncollectible accounts expense, or a doubtful accounts expense. And there are a couple of ways of handling this. You can have the direct write-off method, which is kind of frowned on now. That's saying I only write it off when I know it's bad, which means I take it out of accounts receivable and put it into an expense account, or an expense account called bad debts. The other way is called an allowance account, and this is much better as far as accounting principles are concerned, because this method looks at how much you have in accounts receivable, and you'll say, well, 2% of those are going to be bad. And it's 2% of a lump sum, so you're matching cost and expense with revenue, which is usually the method that's used. And to compare these two methods, if I have a direct write-off method right here, I write it off as a bad debt expense, and I take it right off of the accounts receivable. Now, if they come back and pay it, and I think that's what this is. No, this has not done that. I'm not quite sure what they've done. So usually you have a direct. If you have an allowance account, this is going to go into an allowance account, and then when it actually becomes, see here it went into an allowance account here. Down here, you can see where they actually paid it. So we had to put it back into accounts receivable and take it out of that allowance account, and then we did a cash for receiving the money and took it out of the accounts receivable. One way, you've got a better trail, because this is an allowance account that you've set up. This is where they've paid it. You thought they weren't, but they did. So then you can reverse all of that. So one is a direct write-off, and the other, it goes into an allowance, and it gets put into a pool. This is a much better method. and we will explore this. We're going to do both ways when we do activities, so it'll be a little easier to follow. But these are the journal entries. Here's your characteristics of a note receivable, which is a longer-term note. It's called a promissory note or a note receivable. Characteristics, there's a maker. That's a party making the promise to pay. There's a payee, the party whom the note is payable, and then the face amount. And a note receivable looks like this, and you can see all the components here. Let's see, where's number one? We don't have a number one. Okay, here is page of the order of Pureland Company. It's Selig Company that's writing the note. It's for $2,000, and you can see this written down here. The issue date is March 16th. They're going to pay an interest rate of 10%. Now it's 10% annual. And it's due on June 14th of 2013. So this looks like it's about a 3-month note. So let's go see how they figured the days. So from March 16th to 31st is 15 days. From March 1st or April 1st to the 30th is 30 days. May is 1 to 31 days, and then June is 1 to 14 for 14 days, a total of 90 days. And that's how they're all figured. This is how these will show up on a balance sheet. Here's your cash equivalents. Here's investments that you have at cost. This is the markup because of the investment has increased. And here's your accounts receivable. You know, at face value here, full value, and then this is the allowance they've taken out of it. These are the amounts that they don't believe that are collectible. You can't show a full asset here if you believe that some of those you're not going to be able to collect. So that detracts from that and gives you $292,700. And then the final thing you look at when you're keeping track of accounts receivable is the account receivable turnover. And that'll take the beginning year and the ending year. You'll average that. And then you'll take the average of your accounts receivable. Or you'll take your accounts receivable and divide that by this average you've come up with, the beginning and ending. And this is your accounts receivable, and it turns over 8 times a year, is what it's saying there. We'll look at that also. So as you go through and we look at accounts receivable, we're going to look at 2 things in this chapter. 1, how to do the direct write-off and how to do the allowance method. And 2 is how to calculate how much interest is going to be on this note. How much interest are they going to get for this note? So that's where we're headed with accounts receivable or receivables in general. See you in class.